Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth here. So I wanted to do this video with the topic of 14 beautiful lessons to learn from your past mistakes and failed relationships. So the one thing I do want to state is that I do believe that no relationship is necessarily a mistake. We all make bad choices in life to where we get with either a bad partner or a toxic partner, or we just have a relationship that is, very short-lived. So to some degree, a relationship in itself is not a mistake, because every relationship, whether it's platonic, romantic, a friend from work, every relationship in itself has learning lessons and is a kind of like a gateway to help you learn and evolve in your life. One thing I think a lot of us should look at when we're looking at past failed relationships is that instead of looking at it in terms of why it ended, we should ask ourselves, what did we need to learn from that situation? So as you probably have heard, especially in the spiritual communities, there is this thought that people come into your life for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So not every relationship is meant to last, which is unfortunate. Especially in today's modern dating world, a relationship can last a week. It could last one date. It can last 1 year, or, it might last 50 years. And so there really is no timeline to specific relationships. But the thing is, we all have to look at our past and learn from it. I really think too many people jump from relationship to relationship, or they're just jumping ship so fast and quickly without analyzing what happened in their previous or former relationships, as well as, take time to learn and grow and self-examine themselves during the time of singleton. So here are 14 lessons, and so I'm going to start with the first one. It's analyze what went wrong in the relationship and how to be self-examining. So if you look at what went wrong in any relationship, there's generally 4 to 5 main issues. It's generally communication, sex, money, in-laws, as well as maybe just some uneven desires, not being on the same trajectory in life. So if you kind of look back at what went wrong, maybe one person was not open to having discussions. Their EQ, their emotional intelligence might have been a little bit low, so it was really hard to have difficulties. Or maybe, you shut down internally, which makes you come across as cold and attached, and your partner didn't think that you loved them. So you have to really look and analyze what went wrong, and look at when the relationship started to fail and crumble, as well as the events that what happened during that time that continue to make it kind of suffer or go down the tubes. Being self-examining is extremely important, and this also goes along with point number 2, self-examining. The point number 2 is also look within the mirror. I really believe everybody at the end of some form of a relationship needs to look in the mirror and admit what they've done wrong and what their partner has done wrong, or what their partner did to trigger some sort of behavior. I really believe in a balance in blame. There are some relationships where one person is almost entirely to blame. I'm not even going to say entirely. And other people are a little bit more to blame than others. So, if you have a relationship that had a big imbalance, maybe someone is more of like 75% to blame, but it takes 2 to tango. So both people contribute to the relationship to make it work, but also to make it fail. So I do not believe in pointing the finger and blaming the other person entirely, and I do not believe that anybody should just take all of the blame and just say it's all my fault in this and that and the other. So when you look in the mirror, you can admit to yourself what went wrong, what did you contribute, or did not contribute to the relationship to make it fail. And this also kind of ties into point number 3, which is don't discredit someone's feelings. I look back at my former marriage, and there have been times that I discredited my partner's feelings. And some of that was because I was in this mental space at the time of living abroad, that thinking my life was so amazing because of living abroad to have that opportunity, that everything else underneath was kind of secondary. So some things like lack of intimacy, I was like, well, why complain about it? We're having amazing life experience. You know, everybody prioritizes things on a different level. So if one person prioritizes sex as the most important thing in the relationship, and another person prioritizes, say, something like life experience or, you know, their children and stuff like that, those outlooks and perceptions tend to skew us because it makes us at times not as empathetic, or we just discredit the other person's feelings. So when you're looking in the mirror, you should really take what the other partner said seriously, but maybe not always so seriously. So some people say things out of visceral emotion, and they react in situations to kind of make you feel horrible about yourself. So that's where self-examination comes in, to see if that's legit or not. But if your partner said something like, you're a really selfish partner, it's really difficult to be with a selfish person, or I feel like I can't communicate with you because it's kind of like walking on eggshells, that you would kind of snap or blow up or shut down or something like that, like, you need to kind of take that, even if that person is kind of a horrible human being or a toxic person in themselves, they still have some legit feelings that might help you learn and grow. And a lot of that stuff can be really difficult to hear, but it's really, really important because it can best set ourselves up in the future to not repeat the same mistakes again, or to at least open that somewhat can of worms to where it's like, okay, well, maybe I need to work on my communication issues. Another beautiful lesson to learn is just how to be diplomatic. Diplomacy goes a long way. In today's reality television world, there are a lot of relationships that are not handled with diplomacy. They're not handled through conversations and disagreements, but they are handled more through explosive arguments or visceral reactions and things like that. So diplomacy goes a long way, and I think if you come from a background that has a lot of toxicity in it, or, you know, a lot of people who come from families where their parents argued, and maybe you argue in your form of communication in your present relationship, it's like, okay, let's not necessarily argue, but let's see how we can work through this through a talking conversation without things blowing and erupting in such a negative light. So another lesson that we can all learn from our past relationships is the value of giving and receiving. So there has to be a balance, because generally when it goes too far in one direction, the taker will always take and the giver will always give, but eventually the giver will become resentful, and you know, they might pull out of the relationship because they just feel like their energy and all of their efforts or their thoughts or their kindness and all the gifts that they buy you, that's just being either taken for granted, or they're not getting anything in return and their kind of love tank is feeling empty. So just notice that a lot of times people do giving and taking. They go an extreme end of one side of the spectrum and the other as some form of a protection barrier. So if somebody's been hurt before by their partner, they might protect themselves by not giving as much, and they want to become more the taker in terms of having that other person prove to them that they really care for them by giving, whether that's giving their time, their energy, resources, whatever it is. So another lesson that we can all learn from our past mistakes and failed relationships is that we can develop a better sense of empathy. And this kind of ties along with point the prior point, which is not discrediting someone else's feelings, you know, when you can be empathetic and really learn and understand where your partner is, not only do you have a relationship to work out with each other, but you both are living individual lives. So if your partner is really struggling at work, or work is really pulling them into, into the grind, and they can't spend as much time with the family, there needs to be some empathy that the home life is going to suffer. So the wife and the children might feel a little bit sad because, the dad isn't around, but to some degree, they also have to be a little bit empathetic that effort and that work that husband is putting into their job is also supporting the family. So that's where, some of that balance too with giving and receiving will come into play, but having that sense of empathy and really understanding where each person is coming from. Another lesson from our past mistakes that we can learn to become a better communicator. If you look anywhere online, any video, one of the number one causes of a failed relationship is because of communication. There is either a lack of it, or it is a style or a form of communication, like more combative, argumentative type of relationships that will fail. So communication can make or break your relationship. Another lesson is how to learn and apply the lessons and reassess your priorities while you're in your moments of singleton. So learn how to apply the lessons. Did your partner tell you how horrible of a communicator you are? So if you have a string and a history of being a bad communicator, that is a sign that is a personal issue that needs to be developed. It is almost like it's a sign from God. God sends us signals and stuff every single day, or maybe not necessarily signals and signs every day, but more of like wake-up calls and warnings. If you are in a relationship where a partner left you because you paid no attention to them, and you get into another maybe dating relationship and they're like, you know what, I'm not feeling valued in this. I feel like you're not paying any attention to me. Most of the conversation revolves around you. Take that as a sign that says like you're repeating your same fucking history. So, learn from it. When you are single, it's really good to reassess your priorities. So, for example, if you are in a relationship with someone like a narcissist, it might make you learn how to look for red flags and actually, take red flags seriously on people who are displaying either like signs of narcissism, or they're, have other red flags that don't work for you or fit into your life. So, reassessing priorities is really essential, because who you were at the start of that former relationship is not who you are today. And that person has been a part of your path of growth. And obviously, as you grow in age, there's a lot that I've seen in the millennial generation, and with myself, is like in my 20s, I was like, I don't know if I really want a kid. Like, I really like traveling. I like my Saturdays. And now that I'm older, in my 30s, it'd be really nice to have a family. It's just something, that it's just a natural inherent instinct that is not abnormal to want to take care and raise somebody. So, you can definitely, in this moment of singleton, reassess priorities, but also reassess things that no longer serve you, that you do not want to have in your future. So if you were in a toxic relationship, most likely you don't want to be in a toxic relationship in the future. And just reassess on how you can make life a little bit happier and healthier, and have healthier relationships. So one thing that we can also learn from our past relationships is to develop a deeper understanding of love and relationships, as well as your personal core and moral values. A lot of times we rush to get into a relationship, and when you rush and the relationship is almost like a firework, like it starts off with a bang, it's really great, but then, it fizzles out like a quick flame, like a candlestick might last 8 hours, you know what I mean? So some of the best things happen through time, through slow and steady development, maintaining and building a friendship, a baseline, whatever you want to call it, and letting things evolve. The reality is love is like a garden, and gardens have weeds, but it also needs watered and fertilized in order for it to grow and flourish, to bring out the beautiful flowers and to cultivate the produce. It needs fertilization, and that's exactly what a relationship is. I think a lot of this modern dating advice bullshit is so bad that you know, like I kind of rip on the red pill stuff a lot, and I do empathize with some of the red pill movement because there are a lot of crummy women out there who do use and abuse men, but I just think too that their dating advice is really bad, and it's not going to, their dating advice is not going to apply to the women who have their stuff together, because women are emotional creatures. Like, we're not men. So you have to be able to treat things like a garden and develop a deeper sense of your core and moral values. What are they? I mean, obviously, if you're a toxic person and you're continuing to spin in the cycle of negativity, then that's, you know, probably going to be your future. But if you have moral values that need to be met through the other person, you have to be very clear on that, and you have to be very clear on the type of person that you choose. And this is going to tie into the next lesson, which is how to not enter a future relationship with uneven desires. So if your moral compass and values have been to, you have no intentions of cheating, you want a healthy relationship with a person who might be spiritually grounded or believes in personal growth, you probably aren't going to want to enter a relationship with some, you know, fun party boy or outdoor adrenaline junkie who's kind of seeking, you know, these momentary life experiences to get an emotional high. That is not going to be the same. Like, it's kind of like, too, you know, if you have someone who's religious, like a Christian, you know, them being with an atheist, it might not work out, but it can work out. There has to be love, and there has to be some form of lineation on two people being on the same level but on the same trajectory path. Like, I remember my boyfriend in college, his father was Jewish and the mother was Catholic, and that really, you know, stirred the pot with the family. But the reality is that didn't separate them. They had a very loving and healthy family relationship. You know, they did their religious things on their own, but they also did it together. So I think you have to find that balance point to see what you'll accept. And there are some people, for example, who say they're Catholic, like they just want to be with a Catholic person, and that's completely fine. But you just don't want to enter future relationships with uneven desires. And this is where you kind of go into things with some wisdom. You're trying to move a little bit slower rather than just jumping into the first boat that comes your way. And sometimes, you know, entering these uneven desired relationships are not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times they don't last, but sometimes they do. And sometimes people will get hurt from it. So it depends on how much time you want to waste in your life. So another lesson is to increase the awareness of gratitude and not taking people for granted. This is really common once you enter a long-term relationship with somebody. I'm not saying it's right, but it's very, very easy to take the person for granted. Whether it's taking their giving and receiving, not saying thank you to the sweet and kind, endearing gestures that they do. These things really happen, but when you've lost love in your life, and especially if that other person said, like, you've taken me for granted, you really need to take that seriously. And you really have to develop a sense of awareness to where you're not taking somebody for granted, as well as that person isn't taking you for granted. Like, I've done some really nice things for people and they haven't even said thank you, and I'm like, I just like kind of lost interest. I was like, Jesus, they were so self-absorbed that they just thought like the world revolved around them and that they just deserve to like get everything. So yeah, that's just a point I wanted to make. So one thing that we can learn from our past mistakes and failed relationships is that you take responsibility for your own issues. You can only change yourself. A lot of times we have relationships where there's like a rescuer that's trying to like save somebody or trying to take care of somebody. And that is, you know, sometimes it works out, but like long term, the person who's rescuing might get exhausted from it. And so everybody has to take care of their own issues, whether that's mental health. If you're in debt, you have to take care of your own stuff. You have to maintain some form of independence to keep your stuff together, to also keep the relationship glued together as well. So a relationship, a lot of times, is a mirror to ourselves. And that is a huge learning lesson that a lot of us don't want to admit. When you meet somebody at a specific point in time in your life, that person may be there for a reason, a season, or it might develop into a lifetime relationship. But a lot of times people are mirrors to us. Either they're showing us things about ourselves that we don't necessarily want to confront, or these people are also opening up the gateway for us to learn and develop ourselves. I've met people, like I believe I'm a person of the light. I've met people completely opposite of me who have been a mirror, but they've been kind of from the dark. And it was like they were like latching and leeching onto me, you know, to try to feed off of me. But the irony of those, like that momentary mate, is it fueled my need to have to communicate, because I hate confrontation. And so that sense of understanding, it helped me develop a border and a boundary, but also a sense of being more communicative and upfront and just being like, hey, blah, 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 blah. So the final one is one of the hardest lessons for us to learn, is that sometimes learning lessons from our past mistakes and these failed relationships have the deepest meaning of all, which is the lesson to learn how to love, forgive, and let go. I don't think this is easy. I think if you believe in spiritual notions, a lot of people who do have karmic relationships, they can be toxic. They can also be healthy. Sometimes they don't last because of the intensity, or because there's so much triggering of fear and wounds and things like that, that some of the hardest lessons from our past mistake is just to learn how to let them go, bless them, and forgive them. And that's really hard for a lot of people, because when they've been hurt, they tend to stew in a lot of negativity, but they also, you know, if people aren't developed enough, they almost want revenge, and that comes from some place of bitterness and haste, which that is rooted to the darkness that resides in humanity. That does not come from the light. God and the light wants you to forgive and bless. You can kind of look at these people who've hurt you as lost souls, and you can feel some empathy and feel some sadness for them because they are so lost. But you know, you can wish them the best. It's not easy to do, especially if you're ego-driven, but it is necessary, and it's one of the hardest lessons to learn. And just wish for them to get on a healthier path, that they can be spiritually fed to live a better, healthier life, and that they get what they want. Not easy, but it's important. So those are some thoughts that I have about some beautiful learning lessons that we can learn from past mistakes and failed relationships. I wish you the best in your journey in life and love. And if you have any thoughts or comments on this, definitely feel free to post them. You can subscribe to my channel to help me build this. And you can support me on Patreon, or just thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. See you next time. Bye.